I also want to announce that there is going to be a recording of this evening's information session. For anybody who couldn't join, this will be posted online so that folks can view it in the aftermath. So once again, I'm Bahish Chansey from WXY Studio. Welcome to this evening's information session for One Long Island City. I'm also joined this evening by Hee-Kyung Yang from the Department of City Planning, Queen's Office, who will be presenting along with me tonight. And I'll now hand over to Hee-Kyung.
Thanks, Pahish. Hi, everyone. My name is Haekyung Yang, and I am a planner from New York City's Department of City Planning. I want to welcome everyone to tonight's informational session meeting on OneLIC Neighborhood Plan. I'm joined by Councilmember 1, who represents Council District 26, covering Sunnyside, Astoria, Woodside, including the community of Long Island City. I'd like to also welcome and acknowledge representatives from the Queens Borough President's Office, Assembly Member Mandani's office, and Assembly Member Valdez's office, and other representatives that I can't see at the moment. Thank you for attending tonight. I'll now pass it to Councilmember 1 for welcoming remarks. Councilmember?
Thank you so much, Haegyang and Bahij. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight as we enter an exciting new phase of the OneLIC Neighborhood Plan. If we could put other people on mute who aren't currently speaking. We have now worked for 18 months together for comprehensive planning with the Department of City Planning to collect feedback from Long Island City community members we had 21 engagement sessions, we had 2 surveys, numerous meetings, conversations, touch points, door knocking, digital ads, as well as tabling and having other meetings as well. So now we have had 791 comments on housing, 895 comments on community resources, 771 comments on the need for open space, and 1,278 comments on having a connected, continuous waterfront and more. So we are really excited as a team from my council office to see the neighborhood plans final study be released from WXY and DCP. We're eagerly waiting to read through it as well, as there is a lot of synthesis to be done. And we are excited to go into certification for ULURP. The draft neighborhood plan that will be released at certification is a comprehensive reflection of the thousands of comments that we've heard from all of you the last 18 months. But remember that these are still draft strategies and zoning frameworks included in an offer to a pathway forward for LIC, but it's just that it's still a draft. And we have, as we head into the ULURP process this spring for formal review, is just the beginning, and we have a lot of work to do for the rest of this year to make sure that this takes shape in the ways that we see fit as a community. I'm committed to continuing to work closely with you all and the city to advocate for our needs as constituents and ensure that the final OneLIC neighborhood plan reflects the needs and priorities of existing community members while also planning effectively for the future of Long Island City as a neighborhood and the city as a whole. But I can't do this alone. So during ULURP, members of the community, all of you who have come out to our focus area meetings, our town halls, and our Zoom calls, as well as responding to our surveys and coming and seeing us at community meetings, tabling, I know that you've had many opportunities to provide verbal and testimony feedback, but we urge you to continue to stay with us. It really is a marathon. I know that we're used to having it within 60 days at community board and then 30 days, 30 days, and 30 days, but we want to make sure that we are in it for more than 2-year process. I know that it can be a lot, but we want to make sure that we are providing a case study to the city of what it's like to invest in upfront planning and comprehensive study and engagement and feedback to make sure that anything that comes out of this is really reflective and we have quantitative data to back it up on the decisions that we're making. So I look forward to continuing to hear from you and working with all of you for the public hearings in the coming months. Thank you so much for everything that you are doing. Shout out to Community Board 1 and Community Board 2, as well as all of our nonprofit partners who have really been our rocks in all of this. Thank you so much. And I'll turn it back to DCP. And thank you so much to DCP and WXY. I always have to remind everyone, none of these people, none of us in public service get paid overtime. We are volunteering evenings and weekends. So thank you so much to my own team and our planners, because they're really working overtime around the clock for us, 3 a.m., 7 a.m., you name it. Haegyung and her team are always there to answer our calls. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Council Member. So many of you, as Councilmember noted, many of you have been involved throughout this process in different ways, while some of you are joining us for the first time tonight. We started this process in fall of 2023 and spent nearly a year and a half hosting meetings, workshops, tabling events, and surveys to gather your vision for the future of Long Island City. And now we're moving to the next phase of the process. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to share a recap of the process and what we've heard to date, share an overview of the OneLIC neighborhood plan, and share information about when and how to stay engaged throughout the Uniform Land Use Review procedure, which is also known as ULURP. If you're hearing these terms for the first time, don't worry. We will go over what these mean on the following slides. And to be clear, there are no decisions being made tonight. There is a 7-month public process to finalize the neighborhood plan. We'll explain in detail what that looks like so you all know what to expect at each step. And since we are sharing a lot of information tonight, if throughout the presentation there's something unclear or you have a question, please write it and share it on the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll set aside time after the presentation to answer your questions. My colleagues are helping gather the questions, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. Our goal tonight is to make sure you all walk away with a better understanding of what the next part of this process looks like. And to do that, we will share a summary of the work done so far. Then we'll discuss the planning framework that outlines a vision for the future of Long Island City that we've drafted with the community and stakeholders throughout this process. Next, we will walk you through the steps of ULURP. And lastly, we'll talk about how you can continue to be involved during the ULURP and environmental review process. At the New York City Department of City Planning, we're partnering with Councilmember One to lead a neighborhood planning process. Over the course of these months, we've engaged with Long Island City residents, community organizations, other agencies, and many other local groups to learn about the current needs and to propose ideas for zoning changes, programs, services, policies, and other investments to support the vision for the future of Long Island City. OneLIC is a holistic community planning process to gain input and build consensus on key neighborhood challenges and opportunities towards the development of a neighborhood plan. For the purpose of OneLIC neighborhood plan, the area of Long Island City we're focusing on is represented by the red boundary on this map. The gray line indicates the context area where additional city investments and programs are considered as part of the plan. Long Island City features some of the highest levels of transit accessibility in Queens, as it is a geographic center of New York City. It is well served by subways, regional rail, ferry service, and connections via Queensboro Bridge and proximity to Manhattan. Long Island City is one of the most rapidly developing neighborhoods in the city and in Queens. The neighborhood's legacy as a manufacturing hub has shifted to a mixed-use neighborhood with residential, commercial, and manufacturing uses coexisting in the past few decades. Many companies, from corporate office headquarters to film and industrial businesses, have decided to locate in the neighborhood, drawing a diverse workforce with it. While land use updates since the 1990s have allowed much of the neighborhood to grow, the OneLIC area has been left unchanged and remains locked in place by decades-old regulations, despite the city's housing shortage. The OneLIC neighborhood plan fills in this missing piece, helping to connect the area with the rest of the neighborhood and support its future growth. With its excellent transit access and waterfront proximity, the OneLIC area is a well-suited place to encourage more homes, jobs, community facility space, public waterfront space, and a plan for infrastructure improvements to improve the area's overall resiliency. The plan would address neighborhood needs by creating permanently affordable income-restricted housing for the first time in LIC, updating the waterfront access plan to produce more resilient and better designed public waterfront spaces, directing significant investments to enhance the neighborhood's infrastructure, community resources, and public space, and by activating large city-owned sites to meet community needs. Bahij and the WXY team has helped city planning coordinate many months of engagement to get to these goals today. Bahij?
Thank you very much, Ik-Kyung. And I will note, we now have the Bengali interpretation channel open as well, in case it's needed. So once again, thank you. We're now going to give a quick overview of the 17-month engagement process that has happened so far. I'll start with a summary of the major milestones. We launched One Long Island City neighborhood planning process in November 2023 by engaging residents, workers, business owners, and elected officials about their ideas and priorities for the future of the neighborhood. We worked with many of you to better understand what you love about your neighborhood, as well as what could be improved. Throughout the outreach process, we heard hundreds of ideas and thoughts from community members. Based on this feedback, we began creating a set of shared goals to guide the planning process. Working from these shared goals, as well as continued public input from town halls and workshops, we developed a first draft of the zoning proposal, as well as initial draft strategies, which we shared in June of last year. Then in August, we began the City Environmental Quality Review process, known as SEQR, C-E-Q-R, SEQR, to analyze the zoning proposal while we continued working with partner agencies to determine a set of capital projects, programs, services, and policies that could complement the proposed zoning changes. The environmental review process studies the zoning proposal to understand impacts that growth may have on the neighborhood, and Hee-kyung will go into more detail about that later. As the analysis continued, we worked with you all to dive deeper on two topics that are important to the community: the waterfront, as well as key sites that are owned by the city. Through workshops, a walking tour, and a survey, we collected input that informed the waterfront access framework, as well as an upcoming RFEI, a request for expressions of interest that will be related to the key public waterfront sites. Soon, in a few weeks, the city will release the draft neighborhood plan and begin the public review process known as the Uniform Land Use Review Process, or procedure, or ULURP. At the beginning of the presentation, Hee-kyung said that no decision will be made tonight. That decision-making process happens in that next step, the 7-month public land use review process. You all will have the opportunity to review everything that we're proposing through the neighborhood plan and use these 7 months to deliberate on whether this is the right plan for the future of Long Island City. We're going to talk about each step of ULURP shortly, and you can understand how you can stay involved during that process. Although certain aspects of the plan will continue to develop and refine during public review, the draft plan document will offer the most comprehensive picture of the plan so far, including shared goals, corresponding draft strategies, and detailed descriptions of 3 core components: the updated draft zoning proposal, the waterfront access plan and public sites information, and how you can participate in ULURP. Throughout the process so far, we have engaged more than 1,600 participants across 15 in-person and 5 virtual engagement sessions. In total, more than 5,750 comments have been recorded from community members, along with sticker voting, public polling, and urban design sketches. From January to March of this year, the city also collected responses from community members on their priorities for the city-owned sites. This included an online and written survey that received over 850 responses. These engagement events and the comments we collected culminate with their role in shaping the draft neighborhood plan. Now, we'll go over the shared goals of the draft neighborhood plan. I'll share what we heard about each one of those goals, as well as the draft strategies that are being proposed to advance those goals. The draft zoning framework that was released last year outlined the city's initial ideas on how and where the neighborhood should grow. Alongside the zoning, we shared a set of early concept draft strategies for the ways that city agencies can collaborate to support the neighborhood. Since zoning alone cannot fully achieve the community's vision and goals, this project takes a more comprehensive approach by combining zoning changes with coordinated investments from city agencies, like the Parks Department and the Department of Transportation, DOT, and the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, HPD. In this section, we'll talk through each goal as well as the strategies that those city agencies have been developing based on community input. These strategies include a mix of programs, policies, services, and zoning changes that are all designed to support the goals that shape this neighborhood plan. The OneLIC plan will help achieve the following 5 goals through zoning updates and neighborhood investments and policy changes. 1, protect existing housing and create housing opportunities at a range of income levels. 2, create a connected, resilient, and accessible waterfront from Gantry Plaza State Park to Queensbridge Park. 3, Meet the infrastructure and community needs of a growing neighborhood while mitigating future and current climate change impacts. 4, support the diversity and vitality of Long Island City's unique and thriving economy. And 5, make it easier for LIC residents to access neighborhood resources and amenities. These goals guide both our current and future decision-making about housing, transportation, the public realm, jobs, and more. This drawing is an illustrative view that depicts how zoning changes might affect the future development of the neighborhood. Now I'm going to go goal by goal to discuss what we heard as well as the related draft strategies. So updated goal number 1, protect existing affordable housing and create more housing opportunities for a range of income levels. So during the process, we heard calls for creating more permanently affordable housing, for creating a wider range of units that can help accommodate families who have children as well as older adults. We heard calls to prevent displacement, that of existing residents and homeowners, and for affordable housing that serves very low income households, as well as seniors, unhoused families, and families with disabilities. The draft neighborhood plan proposals can create more housing opportunities at that range of income levels and can make it easier for new and existing residents to call the neighborhood home by doing some of the following. 1, updating the zoning to allow for more housing. This can be done by increasing the permitted residential density, as well as allowing housing in areas where it's not permitted today. 2, we can require 20 to 30% of all units in the new apartment buildings to be permanently affordable as well as income restricted housing by applying a program called Mandatory Inclusionary Housing, MIH. This would be a first for Long Island City, where this requirement does not exist for any of the construction that has happened in the past up to today. 3, identifying additional opportunities for affordable housing. And 4, strengthening support for existing tenants and homeowners to increase housing stability and prevent displacement. This illustration looks towards the water from the Court Square area and shows what the neighborhood might look like after new housing has been created. Updated goal number 2, create a connected, resilient, and accessible waterfront from Gantry Plaza State Park to Queensbridge Park. So from the community engagement process, we heard calls for a continuous waterfront park that connects Gantry Plaza State Park to Queensbridge Park, for more open space, more parks, playgrounds, and recreational facilities, and a lot of calls for public restroom access in and around the waterfront. Folks thought enhanced lighting, wayfinding signage that's better than today, and publicly accessible gathering spaces in waterfront open areas. Folks also hoped that resilient building designs would help to raise the shoreline and address coastal flooding. The OneLIC plan proposes to create a connected, resilient, and accessible waterfront from Gantry Plaza Park to Queensbridge Park in the north. It can do that by increasing the amount of open space with an update to the Hunters Point North Waterfront Access Plan. That would require that all waterfront sites that are developed in the future contribute to a publicly accessible waterfront that's held to a higher standard of design. That can facilitate the creation of really vibrant public space along the water. We can also create a resilient waterfront community with multiple lines of defense by elevating open spaces along the shoreline to address sea level rise, requiring that new streets be raised, and working with the Army Corps of Engineers to mitigate flood risk. We can also use existing zoning incentives that encourage new and redeveloped buildings to future-proof. OneLIC can also expand opportunities for programming and amenities along LIC's waterfront with new zoning incentives and requirements that are tailored to its unique conditions. This illustrative rendering looks across Annabelle Basin to envision what new park and open space might look like as it's developed along the waterfront in the coming years. Updated goal number 3, meet the infrastructure and community needs of a growing neighborhood while mitigating climate impacts. In engaging folks, we heard folks ask for more school seats, particularly more middle school seats, although middle schools are not currently shown as overcapacity. We heard calls for continued investment in existing community facilities and the development of new facilities. Asks for resources and support for the residents of Queensbridge houses, as well as new and better maintained open spaces, especially inland away from the waterfront. Folks asked for shared recreation spaces that include school partnerships, and those asks included support for open streets. We heard asks for infrastructure to reduce flooding and sewer backups during rain events, as well as to mitigate heat in the area. And finally, folks hoped that new development could be built to sustainable and resilient standards. So the OneLIC proposal can meet the needs of a growing neighborhood while mitigating future and current climate impacts by doing some of the following. Encouraging the creation of new public schools. Through a zoning floor area exemption, you can encourage the inclusion of schools in new buildings by not counting that school area toward the development's limit. The plan will also work to expand library resources, including by reopening the Court Square Library. 3, reducing flooding and sewer backups during rain events with stormwater management strategies and investments in infrastructure to reduce those floodings and backups. The plan can help expand and improve neighborhood parks and public spaces. It can do that by establishing zoning incentives that encourage new developments to create public space, especially around the Long Island City core and Queens Plaza area. The plan can also cool streets and public spaces by providing shading structures and cooling features on sidewalks and open spaces, like requiring new development to plant trees along their sidewalks. We can also partner with residents to explore new ways to improve quality of life at Queensbridge houses, including supporting increased access to fresh, affordable foods through community gardening and making finished compost available to the community, and fostering public safety through crime mitigation strategies at Queensbridge houses and the broader area. This section cut drawing at the waterfront shows the way that a park space can step up between the water and the neighborhood street. Doing that can create a protective barrier for coastal floods. That raised shoreline can also host public space, greenery, recreational facilities, and opportunities to get down to the water, as well as support a protected waterfront bike route. Updated goal number 4, support LIC's unique and thriving economy. So through this process, folks asked for expanded access to local jobs for area residents, for more support for small businesses that wish to start and grow in Long Island City, for more partnerships with organized labor and a focus on green jobs and green infrastructure, especially for historically disinvested communities. We heard calls to promote Long Island City as a destination for arts and culture, to expand access to affordable studio space, and to support the community's ability to self-organize and collaborate around creative endeavors as well as economic development. So OneLIC can support the diversity and vitality of Long Island City's economy through a few of the following measures. By supporting the growth of manufacturing and light industrial businesses, by supporting small businesses and local creative communities with connections to city programs that can help businesses start up, build capacity, and grow, by improving the pedestrian experience in ways that create more foot traffic for local businesses, and by mapping new higher density mixed-use districts under the City of Yes for Economic Opportunity program to give businesses more flexibility and allow community facilities to locate alongside a wider range of commercial and industrial uses. This drawing shows what the mixed-use future of LIC may look like at 12th Street Glacial Rock Park, with new street furniture, plantings, as well as crossing safety improvements. You can also see a mix of existing, new, and you can also see a mix of existing and new commercial and industrial buildings. And then finally, updated goal 5. Sorry, if we can make sure the interpretation channels, I muted her for now. Updated goal 5 to improve access to neighborhood resources and amenities. So during the community engagement process, we heard calls for improving reliability, frequency, and the accessibility of subways, regional rail, and buses, for improving food access and public safety in Long Island City, and calls to complete the Queens Waterfront Greenway, a continuous protected multimodal path along the waterfront, as well as improve pedestrian safety and accessibility. So OneLIC can make it easier for Long Island City residents to access neighborhood resources and amenities by making it easier to walk, bike, and use transit through investments in the public realm and streets, and by creating a better street network with new waterfront access and enhanced neighborhood resiliency measures. This bird's eye view at 44th Drive and 21st Street illustrates how one Long Island city can connect people to local businesses and resources with safe, active streets, as well as new investments in bus infrastructure and street safety. So in addition to those 5 updated shared goals of the neighborhood plan, the neighborhood plan, when published, also includes an updated waterfront access plan and envisions a new future for the city-owned sites in the area. As I mentioned earlier, a better connected waterfront is one of the main goals of the draft neighborhood plan. New York City's waterfront zoning regulations aim to transform underutilized waterfronts by requiring that new privately owned developments include publicly accessible open spaces that complement the city's network of public parks. A waterfront access plan, WAP, adapts the standard waterfront zoning for specific site conditions. The existing Northern Hunters Point waterfront access plan was established in 1997. These 28-year-old regulations have become outdated, and they do not include newer access requirements that help to enhance the design and resiliency of waterfront spaces. OneLIC presents an exciting opportunity to craft waterfront regulations that match Long Island City's character. They can help to promote connectivity, vibrancy, and resiliency across the neighborhood. The proposal's updated waterfront access plan can better reflect LIC's waterfront conditions and community needs, can increase access to the East River and to Annabelle Basin, can encourage a wider range of public amenities at the waterfront, and also allow for more climate-resilient waterfront spaces. Another component of the plan that supports waterfront connectivity is a street mapping action that would create new public streets. These streets can help to create a legible and connected public access along the waterfront. They can account for a variety of potential site planning outcomes, and this action can bring all the mapped streets up to a basic dimensional standards. And finally, the OneLIC study area includes a number of publicly owned sites that could advance OneLIC's neighborhood planning goals. The 3 largest of these sites are located near the East River along 44th Drive. The city hopes to utilize large publicly owned sites located at that East River location to generate affordable housing, open space, retail and commercial space, and community facilities that would serve the needs of future and existing Long Island City residents. During the January publicly owned sites workshop, the community came out to hear about the existing conditions of these sites located along Annabelle Basin and provide feedback on their priorities. The city heard the need for affordable housing and community resources at 4459 44th Avenue. And that building, currently where the DOT is proposed to develop an income-restricted affordable housing building, 100% affordable with approximately 320 homes and a large community facility. That community facility can be included for things like an educational use. In the coming weeks, 4436 Vernon Boulevard will be the subject of a request for expressions of interest in RFEI to solicit ideas for the future of the building that are informed by community feedback heard through the public engagement process. So that concludes the draft neighborhood plan overview. In this next section, I will pass it back to Hee-Kyung, who's going to explain the next steps in this process and provide more information on how you can continue to stay involved.
Thanks, Paige. All the work we've done is finally coming together, and we'll be releasing the draft neighborhood plan. The zoning changes we're proposing as part of the neighborhood plan will go through the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure, ULURP. Part of this process includes sharing the outcomes of the environmental review study. Now, what is the What is the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure? It's NYC's public review process used to approve any land use and zoning changes. It involves input from the community, borough president, city planning commission, and city council before a final decision is made. Now, to start the process, a land use application is filed. This is a set of documents that explains the entire project, including what it is, the area being studied, who is proposing the changes, why they are needed, and what specific actions are being requested. In the coming weeks, we will be filing our application for the neighborhood plan, and it will be available for everyone to review. ULURP is a 7-month process with specific steps, which I'll go through in the following slides. When we submit the application, the City Planning Commission, the CPC, will review it to make sure it's complete and ready for public review. This step is called certification. It's important to know that certification does not mean that the project is approved. It just means that it can start the public review process. Once the project is certified, it goes to the affected community boards for review. Now, in this case, the application will be sent to Queens Community Board 1 and 2. These boards usually hold meetings and public hearings so community members can share their thoughts on the proposal. After gathering feedback, the community boards can make a recommendation to approve or disapprove the proposal, explaining their reasons and suggestions for any conditions. And they have 60 days to submit their recommendations. Next, the proposal goes to the Queens Borough President for review. Like the community boards, the Queens Borough President can hold public hearings so residents can share their thoughts directly. The Queens Borough President may also bring the community boards together for a discussion known as the Borough Board. The Borough President and the Borough Board then have 30 days to make a recommendation to approve or disapprove the proposal, explaining their reasons and suggesting any conditions, and hearing the feedback from the community on what they would like to see. If you're not familiar with who the City Planning Commission is, they are a group that makes decisions about land use changes. After the community boards and borough president review the proposal, the CPC will hold a public hearing to hear directly from the community. They then will consider all the feedback from the community board, the borough president, and the public hearings, along with the proposal itself before deciding whether the application should move forward in the process. They can also request changes to the proposal based on the feedback. They have 60 days to make their final decision and make any amendments to proposal. If the City Planning Commission approves the proposal, it moves to the next step, City Council review. The City Council will review the proposal, including all the recommendations that have been shared by the Community Board, the Borough President, and the City Planning Commission. They also hold public hearings to gather more community input and can request changes based on feedback. The City Council has 50 days to make any revisions and vote on whether to fully approve the proposal. If the City Council approves the proposal, the mayor will review it and either approve it, making the changes official, or veto it. If the mayor vetoes the proposal, the City Council can choose to override the veto with a majority vote, which will also make the changes official. In summary, ULURP is a 7-month process where the proposal is reviewed and everyone has a chance to voice concerns in the proposal and raise any potential impacts that may hinder the neighborhood's future. It's also an opportunity to share the proposed plan and highlight any new investments needed to support that vision. To help everyone understand the proposal, a set of materials will be available in the coming weeks. We are creating a draft neighborhood plan book, a visual summary of the proposal and all the work done so far, the land use application, which provides a full description of all actions being proposed, the draft environmental impact statement, DEIS, which identifies impacts from the proposed plan, and lastly, there will be a certification presentation, another visual resource explaining the proposal. These materials are intended to complement each other as materials for a holistic review for the OneLIC proposal. Now we're going to go over what an environmental review study is and what you should expect from it. If you're not familiar, the City Environmental Quality Review, or SEQR, is a process that looks at how proposed land changes, like the neighborhood plan we're talking about tonight, might impact the environment, such as how new growth may impact city services, open space access, and other public infrastructure within the city area. The findings are shared publicly, allowing you all to review, ask questions, and provide feedback before any decisions are made. Now, in this case, the environmental review is studying how changing the zoning might affect different topics like air quality or transportation. It identifies potential impacts, ensures that the information is available publicly, and suggests ways to reduce or eliminate any significant negative impacts, if any are identified. The environmental review has been studying these 18 topics, which include topics like water and sewer infrastructure, open space, transportation, noise, and other topics. To figure out if a zoning change would have an impact, we follow a set of guidelines in what's called the Seeker Technical Manual. In a very simplified explanation, we compare two scenarios. First, we estimate what development in the neighborhood might look like in the future if the zoning stays the same. Then, we similarly estimate what development could look like if the zoning changes are approved. The difference between these two scenarios, what changes because of the zoning update, is called increment. That's what we study to understand potential impacts on those 18 different topics. We released the draft scope of work last July 8th, outlining the topics we would be analyzing. On August 12th, we held a public meeting for feedback on that outline, known as scoping meeting. Now we're getting ready to release the next report called the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, DEIS. DEIS. This report, which will come out when we start the Euler process in a few weeks, will be available for everyone to read and will explain the outcomes of the study. And just to be clear, the DEIS isn't finished yet. It's still in draft form and will go through the Euler process alongside the Euler land use application materials. The City Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on both the LUA, so the land use application materials, and the DEIS, where the public can share their thoughts. A final report, the final environmental impact statement called FEIS, will be published at the end of the Euler process. That includes updates and all feedback collected. We talked about the environmental review process, and the big takeaway there is that the proposed zoning changes are still being studied right now, and you all will get to read the outcomes of the DEIS soon. We've had engaging and fruitful conversation in nearly 2 years that have led to what we hope to be a robust framework and proposal. The key thing to remember is that ULURP is a next stage where you review and officially weigh in on this proposal. Over the next 7 months, there will be multiple public hearings hosted by the community boards, the borough president, and the City Planning Commission and the City Council, giving you multiple chances to participate. We understand that attending meetings isn't always easy, so you can also share your thoughts in writing at any time throughout the process by going to our DCP website. If the neighborhood plan is approved, the final neighborhood plan will include the final zoning changes, the final environmental impact statement, a list of city commitments outlining the investments that will be made in LIC. To stay engaged, please go to OneLIC website at licplan.nyc or scan the QR code. Thank you. We'll now pivot to Q&A portion of today's session. If you'd like to ask a question off mute, please raise your hand. If you prefer to ask a question via chat, please submit via the question button below. Back to Mahesh.
Thank you so much, Hee-Kyung. Hopefully folks found the presentation informative. We're going to now jump into Q&A, like Hee-Kyung said. So there's two options for submitting a question into the Q&A. You can use the Q&A function, which you should be able to see at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It's highlighted on the slide here. It looks like a little speech bubble with a question mark in it. We're reviewing those questions as they come in, and we'll start to answer those. And then you can also put your hand up if you're interested in asking a question live. So we will, when we invite somebody to ask a question live, give us a moment while we make you into a panelist so that you can come off mute and ask your question. We're going to start with a few questions that were submitted in the chat, and give me one moment here while we transfer over to the Q&A portion and I stop sharing screen. All right, folks. Thank you once again, and thank you for your patience. All right, we are going to start off with some of the questions that were submitted to the Q&A. So the first one is just a process question. An anonymous asker asked, when does the ULURP process begin and how can we participate in that process? I'll hand it over to Hee-Kyung to please answer that first question.
Thanks, Mahesh, and thank you for the question. So we expect ULURP to begin in the coming months. Community members can participate by providing written testimony or attending meetings in person at the community boards, borough president, city planning commission, and city council as each takes their turn in the 7-month process.
All right, thank you very much, Yikyung. All right, our next question is from Laura Wolf Powers, who's asked, where can we read the environmental impact study, the EIS? Can DCP post this on your website? And I'll hand back to Yikyung.
Okay, thanks, Laura. The draft EIS will be made publicly available through our zoning application portal shortly, ahead of certification of the proposal. We'll add links to the licplan.nyc website to make it easy for access. So expect it coming in a few weeks.
Okay, I also I'm a little confused. Are we going to be certifying sometime end of April or in a couple of months?
Hi, Counselor. Yes, in a couple of weeks. Yes.
Okay, because it was said couple of months and then I got confused.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm so
thank you. So
sorry.
in a couple of weeks. I
In
know
a
it's
couple of
been
weeks.
a lot of long hours for you. Thank
I
you.
apologize.
And I'll just reiterate that certification does not mean that the proposal is approved. It just means the proposal's been reviewed and it's accepted to begin the ULURP process. So just to be totally clear on what certification here means. All right, one more procedure question, and then I'm going to go after that to one of our folks who has their hand up. Christina Chase has had your hand up in the chat for a while, and so if we can get you prepared to ask a question after this next one from the Q&A. So from the Q&A, Melissa Bieri asks, when is the proposal certified, and can the ULURP be done faster than 7 months?
Bahija, I think that question's to me, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for the question, Melissa. So the proposal, as council member reminded me, is in a couple of weeks. And your question about whether it can be done faster than 7 months, the answer is yes, technically. The community board has up to 60 days, but they can vote and recommend sooner. Same process with the Queensborough president, as well as the CPC and city council. So it can be shortened, but the maximum that we talked about were stated in the presentation.
Okay, I'm going to now try to go to Christina Chase. Can you please try to unmute and you can try to ask your
Okay.
question live?
Sorry,
Sure.
Paige, to cut you.
Can you hear me?
But I
One
want
moment,
Oh,
Christina. We're going to have a
no
word from the
problem.
council member. Thanks.
I want to make it clear that we won't be going faster than 7 months, and I fully trust that I can speak on behalf of both Community Board Chair 1 and Community Board Chair 2. This will not be rushed through Community Board, so we will be taking the full 7 months. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, council member 1. And Christina, over to you for your question. Thanks for your patience.
All right, no problem. Good evening. I've been part of this process since the very beginning, and I'm very concerned because I can almost guarantee you that this plan does not reflect the needs or priorities of longstanding members of the community. Nobody at the town hall said that they wanted luxury skyscrapers, and we actually said the opposite. I don't think we should move forward to ULURP because this draft does not have enough meaningful participation. And so my actual question is, considering how little Queensbridge residents know about the neighborhood plan and the proposals for right across the street, particularly the upzoning of 21st Street between 40th Avenue and Queens Plaza North that would permit 50 to 70-story luxury buildings with sprinkles of affordable housing, leaving residents in the dark in their 6-story units. How would the Queensbridge community considering how them over 6,000 residents were omitted from this study area and the impact study, is this DEIS valid?
Thank you very much for your question. I'm going to go to Hee-kyung in a moment, but I will just say that during the engagement process, we have made a lot of efforts to try to come out and meet community residents where they are at Queensbridge Houses, at the Jacob Riis Community Center.
Mhm.
And I really want to encourage folks from Queensbridge Houses residents to stay involved as we go through the ULURP process. As we said, it's a proposal at this stage, and there are ways that this proposal can be strengthened so that it really meets the needs of folks in the area. But I want to go to the Department of City Planning. Hee-kyung, if you can pick up on the rest of the question.
Thanks, Christine. So just wanted to note that the city is not planning to change ownership or management structure of Queensbridge houses. Um, just to sort of share that the sites are public housing and will remain public housing. And the city is not looking to add any buildings to these developments. And as the new public housing opportunities, the Public Housing Authority will prioritize its existing residents and buildings before expanding it. Now, in the LIC study, we want to consider planning for quality of life and opportunities and workforce within Queensbridges. We've spoken to several residents during our engagement, as Bahij mentioned, and they have shared with us their concerns really about the quality of life that we've spoken about in the presentation. And we're working together with other city agencies to work towards those goals. And I just want to note that the DEIS is the environmental review process that is sort of takes a look at the holistic picture of the entire study area.
Thank you, Hee-kyung. Thank you for your question, Christine. I'm going to go to a couple of questions from the chat. We have a few questions that came in on similar topics, so I'm going to read out a few of them and then we'll answer them together. These are a few of the questions that came in around schools. So the first of these questions was, is the school exemption to the FAR a general land use tool used citywide, or is it specific to this area? And I'll just say in answer to that, the school exemption would only apply within the Long Island City project area. So it is a special tool that would be used in this case. The second question was that is somewhat of a statement. BSGE, the school, is out of capacity. Students can barely walk in the hallway. To get to the question, you'd like to know if a new building for schools will be part of the project. So in answer to that, I'll say that the draft environmental impact study that is currently underway is working to analyze the impacts of the number of residents in this neighborhood and the potential growth for that number of residents with the number of school seats that are currently available in the district. If there is found to be a mismatch where there are not enough school seats in this district, the city will propose mitigations to try to address these impacts. The proposed school area exemption is one of those ways that the city has tried to work through this zoning proposal to encourage the creation of schools in this area. Another one of those school-related questions. Could you please elaborate on what was meant by expanding school spaces without counting toward the limit? I believe I said that. It was mentioned in the detail to goal 3. That's in reference to that floor area exemption. So it is a tool to say that if you are allowed to build, let's say, a 10,000 square foot building, the floor area that school facility takes up could not be counted in that limit, which is an incentive to include that as one way to also build out your development. That would not be included in the limit for floor area. And then finally, there were many views expressed regarding the need for new school seats, and people are wondering why and how it is reflected in the final proposal. So I would reiterate the note about the DEIS, but I also want to hand over to Hee-kyung and the folks at the Department of City Planning if there's additional notes you want to add about schools here.
Yeah, no, thanks for covering that, Bahij. The DEIS will analyze impacts on the number of school seats available in the district and will propose mitigations addressing these impacts. And the proposed schools floor area exemption will support the creation of these new schools in this district. Um, I think that answers the question. Tell me if I'm missing.
All right, folks. I'm next going to go to another live question. Jenny Dunbow is the next person who you have your hand up. So we're going to try to promote Jenny, and you should be enabled to unmute yourself and ask a question to the group. Let's
Yes,
give
can you hear
you.
me?
Yes, we can. All right, please go ahead, Jenny. Hi.
Hi there. Related to what Christina Chase asked earlier, I'm wondering about how legitimate and how much this EIS really reflects all of the meetings that we've been to, including 4 scoping letters written by important stakeholder organizations in the community, ranging from Community Board 2 to Western Queens CLT to the Long Island City Coalition to the Ravenswood Tenants Association, asking for a different scope to include not upzoning the public land, to include 2 existing neighborhood plans, and from the point of view of Ravenswood tenants, to think about not doing such a major upzone that would overshadow and not be affordable to them. Is this a legitimate process? Doesn't the EIS have to really reflect accurately the community input?
Thank you very much, Jenny, for your question. I'm going to hand that to the Department of City Planning, who's managing the EIS process.
Thanks, Jenny. So the final scope of work and the draft environmental impact statement, the DEIS, will be released before the OneLIC plan enters the public review process. And these documents outline the scope of potential zoning changes and zoning proposal in full. I hear your comments, and we look forward to hearing from you and the community about thoughts on the proposal during this review process.
Hey, Kyung, I'd love to just also add that there is a chapter within the EIS that is titled The Response to Comments. So we do read and respond to all of those comments that we received at that scoping meeting over the summer and discuss how it relates to the proposal. So we will be reflecting that within the document.
Thank you both, as well as thank you to Jenny for asking the question. I'm going to take another one of our written questions from the Q&A. This one is around mobility and transportation. And just so folks are ready, I will give the next spoken question over to Fanny Cheng, who's had her hand up for a while in the chat. So after this question, we'll go to you, Fanny, and please promote Fanny so that they're ready to speak. So the question that came in the chat, or not the chat, the Q&A function is, in addition to improving options to walk, bike, and use transit, how will the plan advance these goals with the need to provide safe and efficient access for trucks to support essential consumer and commercial and industrial business needs? And how will the seeker review measure and address parking demand for the increased residential and employee population that the rezoning would support? So I'm going to hand this over to Colin in a moment. But I will just say that through this planning process, this comes up a lot. This is a unique area because of the proximity of residential homes, businesses with some pretty larger industrial businesses. And we heard from a lot of folks in the community that conflicts between large trucks, logistic, delivery vehicles, and pedestrians and bicyclists was an issue here. I will just say that during the engagement process so far, we've worked with the Department of Transportation to try to devise new ways that we can ensure that the street designs that can be implemented in this area are cognizant of that and that they do as much as they can to create good and strong and novel ways to protect pedestrians and other more vulnerable road users from some of those larger vehicles that do access this area. So, Colin, I'm going to go over to you on how that traffic and transportation is analyzed in the seeker.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for covering that first part. So as Hye-kyung mentioned during the presentation, the EIS, the environmental impact statement, will measure the increment or the difference between the existing conditions today and the future with the proposed actions. And in that EIS, one of the increments that are measured is the amount of traffic that is generated through those proposed actions and the infrastructure needed to support it. And so there will also be a chapter in the EIS that will propose mitigations in order to address those impacts.
Thank you, Colin. So our next speaker, I'm going to go to Fanny Cheng, who's had her hand up.
Good evening. Nice to see you all again. My question is there any discussion to have 40% affordable on this plan, like Innovation Queens? That was also in District 26.
Thank you very much for your question, Fanny.
And then there's a second question. In the CEQR report, the environmental contaminations was checked off. Is there a list that city planning has compiled at this point?
I'm going to hand that over to the Department of City Planning on both the question about the percentage of affordable housing at 40%, as well as the portion about whether anything has been listed from the findings of the seeker on contaminants.
Okay, I'm gonna try the first one, and I'm gonna ask Colin to help with the second part. But hi, Fanny.
Hi.
So the portion, your question about the 40%, that will be decided through this entire Euler process towards the end of the public ULERP. So when it gets to the council member, I mean, sorry, city council vote, that is when the full discussion will be had. But keep the opinions coming and the concerns coming. We are hearing it throughout the entire public process. And then the list of contaminants, Colin, can you help answer if there's a list of sites?
Yeah, I can try and take a stab at this because there's a few different chapters that might be addressing what you're asking about. You know, for example, air quality, and that can be through construction, that can be through hazardous materials, and then also like solid waste and sanitation. So all of these sorts of things are being analyzed in the EIS, and we'll put designations on sites that are deemed as relevant towards those environmental impacts, and we'll outline kind of what steps they need to take in order to address any redevelopment.
Thank you very much, Colin, and thanks, Fanny, for your questions. I'm next going to go to another question written into the Q&A. I will say, if you have a question and you want to say it aloud, we don't have a huge queue of people, so feel free to put your hands up and we'll get you in here. All right, so this next question from the Q&A is from Margaret Flanagan, who asks, how will or can the plan increase the maritime access for boats on the Queens waterfront, which supports small businesses, green micro delivery, environmental education, recreation, and emergency services? They state that working piers, berthing points, and movable fences are needed for all those beneficial uses. And I am going to hand this over to the Department of City Planning folks, unless you'd like me to take a first stab.
Thanks, Leash. I guess I can go. So thanks for your question. Over the past few decades, Long Island City's waterfront has gone on significant transformation. The departure of industrial uses on the waterfront has left the shoreline a bit derelict and inaccessible. The zoning changes proposed as part of this plan, OneLIC plan, will enable existing patterns of residential and commercial development to extend along Annabelle Basin and further north, unlocking new opportunities for revitalization, remediation, public access, and resiliency. And as economic opportunities in the waterfront grow, the city will continue to collaborate with city agencies such as SBS, Mayor's Office of Talent and Workforce, and EDC to strengthen job training opportunities, ensure that people and businesses in the neighborhood can participate in this growth.
Thanks, Yukyung. All right, I'm going to go to another question from the chat next. And then the next person I see with your hand up in queue is Danielle Brecker. So we're going to invite you to speak in a moment if we can promote Danielle so she's ready to speak. This next question from the Q&A came from Stephanie Taylor. Another question about the waterfront, asking, will this plan include the planting of trees along the waterfront? And they state that it can get really hot during the summer, which makes it difficult to enjoy the amenities there. So I'll field this and you can pick up, Colin, if I miss anything. But as part of the proposed actions, the proposed updates to the Northern Hunters Point Waterfront Access Plan would accommodate this. The Waterfront Access Plan identifies certain waterfront sites where you are required to put public access to the waterfront. The requirements in the WAP also provide that you must put open space, including recreational amenities, as well as required planting and landscaping. And I'll just say that outside of the waterfront areas, there is also a regulation in New York City for new development to plant trees along their sidewalks. So it can also contribute to bringing more greenery, more trees to the area. I don't know if you all have anything to add on the DCP side. Looks okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and thank you for your question very much, Stephanie. I am next going to go to Danielle to ask the question live.
Hi, thank you. In full disclosure, I do serve on community board too. And thank you for having this meeting tonight. So this is about zoning, and my question is actually about the funding that is going to have to come along with zoning. All of this development will mean that we need public infrastructures, public schools, green space, and sewers, to name a few. And that will mean investment likely from the city and the state. How do we make sure simultaneously with this process that we are securing that funding and that it is binding? And what happens if we get that funding and then it is rescinded? Are we still proceeding with the rezoning and the development? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Great question. And I'm going to hand over to the Department of City Planning, who I think is best suited to be able to answer that for us. If you can please go ahead, Hee-kyung.
Yeah, great. Hi, Danielle. Thank you. So as part of the Euler process, as identified earlier, we will be analyzing not only the Euler zoning actions, but parallel to it, the environmental. So during those environmental draft environmental uh, chapters that identify some of the impacts that the zoning and the density will bring, we will be working with our partner agencies who will be reviewing those chapters along with the public, and from there. Conversations on how to sort of mitigate these impacts will be discussed throughout the entire process. Colin, is there anything I'm missing here? Okay, so I hear your concern, Danielle. It is a concern of ours as well, but we will be lock and step throughout the entire process.
Thanks, Hee-kyung. Okay, I'm going to go next to a question from the chat, the Q&A once more. This next question is from Rob Besh. And I will just give a heads up that as the next live question asker, I'm going to invite Margaret Flanagan to be promoted to ask your question as the next asker. So to the question in the Q&A from Rob, Rob says that, I see the Silver Cup Studios has applied to take over the DOT space under the 59th Street Bridge. They would like to use it for storage and are asking for a 10-year lease at approximately $90,000 a year. I thought all this space and the Silver Cup space adjacent is supposed to be included in the OneLIC plan. Please advise. I'm going to hand that question over to Colin on the Department of City Planning team so that we can get you an answer, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, for your question. The OneLIC plan does include disposition of a number of ramp sites that are administered by the DOT. And by ramp sites, I just mean lots that are located beneath the ramps onto the Queensboro Bridge. This could provide the opportunity for the creation of new open spaces under these ramps. However, these dispositions does not include, from my understanding at least, of the lots that you're referring to next to Silver Cup Studios. However, if you do have a vision for these sites, we'd really encourage you to come out to that Euler process and share that with us. We'd love to hear that.
Thanks, Colin. All right, if Margaret is ready to come off mute and ask your question live, I think we can do that as our next question.
Thank you. I did unmute. Thank you all very much. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a follow-up question. I'm referring to my original question about the waterfront, where I appreciate the positive answer, but just found it very general. And so particularly if any community board leaders are listening on the call tonight and anyone from the council member's office, I hope that perhaps my questions may inspire you to continue to ask more specific questions about real access to the water, because a waterfront access plan actually guarantees more of a promenade situation. It does not guarantee actual on-water access, which is so beneficial for our economy. There are so many small maritime businesses in the city that have lost their berthing in other spots. Green transportation, as we said, healthy education and recreation, but that infrastructure does not come easily. So if it's not codified at the start in a plan like this, we're likely not to get it. A good example, I think, is your very own presentation. Has many kayakers in the water in the pictures, but no kayak dock anywhere in the pictures. So you really have to get into those details. The infrastructure is a little bit more costly. I don't think you can rely on the markets and individual private developers to come up with those funds unless there really is a group effort. So if you all have other ideas right now on how that could be tackled, that I'd appreciate, hearing from you right away. And I encourage other community members to please continue asking those questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Margaret. And I will just sort of reinforce your question by saying that during the community engagement process, we heard folks with similar concerns and hopes to be able to get down to the waterfront, especially with boats. We heard especially a group of folks who is interested in having a community boathouse and boat access at the water as well. I'm going to hand over to Colin from the Department of City Planning, who can hopefully provide a little bit more detail about the waterfront access plan that hopefully can answer your question.
Sure, thanks, Bahij. We'll have a lot of more details to be sharing at the certification for this project in terms of the list of actions that we're proposing. But we are trying to include ways to get LIC's boating community involved. So that does include an incentive for boat launches. But more details will be coming before the end of the month.
Thanks, Colin. Right, I'm going to go back to a question from the chat, and I'll say that after responding to the chat question, I'm going to invite Natalia Hertel to come on to the panel and unmute yourself and ask your question live. So this next question that was submitted in through the Q&A comes to us from Brian V, who's asked a couple of questions. I'm just going to do the first right now. Are there other neighborhoods, cities that have already implemented similar solutions for the affordable housing plan, or would Long Island City be the first that tries out these housing solutions? I think I can probably field this one. I'll say that mandatory inclusionary housing, MIH, which is the tool that is being suggested to apply here and require the 20 to 30% of affordable units in all new developments. That tool, mandatory inclusionary housing, is a relatively new tool. It's only about 10 years old in New York City. New York City's program is also the broadest in the country, and I'll say, just having done some work in Boston myself, they also have a similar program, but they don't go as far in terms of requiring as many units to be affordable or as deeply affordable. So I think that New York City's is one of the further reaching programs here. In recent years, the Department of City Planning has pursued neighborhood-based plans that have applied mandatory inclusionary housing in Jamaica, Crown Heights, Midtown South, and Gowanus that maps this new tool in certain locations throughout the city. This would be the first time that the tool's applied here in Long Island City. Affordable housing under mandatory inclusionary housing is income restricted and it is rent stabilized permanently, and it helps residents put down roots in the neighborhood in new ways. I will just say that because I'm very familiar with the Gowanus rezoning, we're seeing a lot of mandatory inclusionary housing affordable units now come onto the market as some of those buildings are starting to finish up there. I am going to go ahead and invite Natalia to unmute if they have joined us on the panel.
Sure, great. Thank you for this information session. Thank you for taking my question. So my question is regarding the building at 44-59 45th Avenue. I recall seeing in one of the plans that it was destined to be a middle school. So just, I guess, wanted to get some context how that building from a middle school became affordable housing in the plan. And then I'll just add a little bit of context to this. The many questions that you have received regarding BSGE in particular and those school seats. Is there a way to reframe this question rather than sort of middle school's seats in the district? Think about it in terms of screened, academically screened seats that are available to students in this area within a reasonable commute. Because frankly speaking, there are not that many. And this is one of the schools that has very strong academic record, in fact, number 10 in the city. And the current building that is in Astoria is completely insufficient to meet students' needs. It's actually unsafe. Students are very crowded in the hallways. So I know others have raised that. So I guess, is there a way to kind of frame the question in those terms to really highlight the need for a screened middle school and high school seats within reasonable commuting distance for the students in the area? So two questions in one. I
No, thank you very much, Natalia.
Sure.
I'm going to hand that over to the Department of City Planning as they're leading the environmental review process that deals with that directly. Hee Kyung, please.
Thank you. Hi, Natalia. Thank you so much for your question. So first, the DIS analyzes the draft environmental impact statement that I've been speaking about in the presentation, analyzes the impact of number of schools available, school seats available in the district, and then proposes mitigation to address these impacts, right? So the proposed schools for exemption area that exemption, that tool that Bahij will talk about, really helps to support the creation of the new schools in the district. So I'm hearing that you sense a need for the need for new schools in this district, right? And I do want to note that this area does have a limited number of public sites, and we've heard a wide variety of calls for sort of the best use of these sites. You've noted the site formerly or currently for the DOT. That is owned by the DOT by the waterfront. And the city sees the site as having the really the ability for multiple uses. So we're really talking about including affordable and income restricted homes, as well as, you know, we've heard throughout the engagement the need for community facility space, and that does include a need for schools. I mean, sorry, the use of schools under the category of community facilities. This proposal again includes the community facility space that I just noted, and it can have the potential of using that space as school. I do want to note that here, and Councilmember had one as a very strong advocate of the school seats in the area. So we're working actively with the analysis that we're getting from the DEIS, as well as you know, our partner agencies at SCA, to really get a fuller picture of the needs in this area.
Thanks very much, Hee Kyung. I'm going to give the next heads up to Memo Salazar. We'll ask you to be the next off mic question answerer. And in the meantime, I'll go back to one of the questions that has come in through the Q&A. Maybe this is a pretty straightforward answer, I'll say. Laura Myers asks, does any of this planning include Socrates Sculpture Park? Thank you. I will just say, no, it does not. The Socrates Sculpture Park to the north is just outside of the area that this study is investigating and looking into. I'm going to go ahead and invite Memo Salazar, if you were in with us now, to please unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm trying. Can you give us a little more clarity on the 3 public parcels? Almost a little bit piggybacking on the last question. You've got this RFEI that's going to come out. Are you lumping the 3 parcels as one project that the RFEI and then subsequent RFP are going to go over, or are you splitting them up? And is the school that you just talked about on the DOT building, like, is that going to have its own RFP, or, you know, I guess I'm just trying to get clarity on like how these parcels are going to be doled out, and if you're thinking of them as one lump sum. And also, if you are, I guess sort of a secondary question is, are you still considering rezoning those to mixed use, and again, all 3, could one remain and the other one be mixed use? Like, what are the specifics of the 3 parcels, and are you viewing them as one project, and so on?
Thank you very much, Memo. I think that question is best answered probably by the folks in the Department of City Planning. I'm also going to check if there's any additional information that we need to provide from the Economic Development Corporation, who's also leading the RFEI process. But I'm first going to hand it over to Hee Kyung to start on that answer.
Thank you, Paige. Thanks, hi, Memo. Thank you for the question. So in the previous slide in the presentation, we noted the 3 sites. One is by the waterfront. It's owned by the SBS. It's currently now a parking lot that's adjacent to the DOE building, that's along the Vernon Boulevard, and then you're talking about the not sliver, but more of a rectangular lot that's owned by the DOT. They are not lump summed as one. The RFEI is as we noted during our January workshop, is going to be sort of focusing on the DOE building, right? So we're requesting for information of expression of interest in the coming weeks following the OneLIC neighborhood plan. The city expects the open response period to last several months and somewhere later in the fall. Now, the RFEI will ask respondents to submit ideas responsive to the community priorities and what we've heard throughout the neighborhood planning process so far. So that's happening specifically through the DOE building. And the city will not be, I just want to be clear here, the city will not be selecting a developer through the RFEI process, but the responses may inform the future approaches to the Vernon building. Now, your question about the DOT, the school, as related to the previous question, the DOT site, that DOT site will have a UDAP action, which has a proposal in our OneLIC proposal that speaks about the potential site being used for multiple uses, right? We talked about affordable housing as well as the community facility space that we've sort of mentioned could be educational use, a school. So they're separate. And for right now, I think that answers your questions about the one more, I just wanted to fully answer your question here. The site on the waterfront, site has not been identified for redevelopment or anything like that. It is just a site owned by the city currently.
Thank you, Hee-Kyung. I'm also
Yeesh, if I could just add a
Yeah,
little
go
more
ahead.
context.
Yeah,
Memo,
please.
thank you for your very thorough questions. We can always rely on that. I just want to add a little more color. Just with respect to the DOT site and the affordable housing, it's a little too soon for us to say how the future of those RFPs will work or when they'll be sequenced. But generally, affordable housing projects do have to go through an RFP process. So that's something that we can expect in the future. And then also just to underscore that by mapping paired districts to manufacturing and residential district on these sites, it allows for all of these types of uses, but does not mandate any one of them.
Thank you, Colin. I will just add in, there's been an additional question that came in through the Q&A that was also about the RFEI, so let's just address together. Somebody asked how the RFEI fits into the 7-month ULURP process. I'll just take this based on what I understand from EDC. So it is not directly in the ULURP process, but the city expects that the open response period for the coming request for expressions of interest would last for several months and probably end sometime later this fall. The RFEI asks respondents to submit ideas that hopefully respond to the community priorities that we heard through our engagement process so far. There will not be a developer selected from that RFEI process. Just to be totally clear, in many and most cases, an RFEI is followed up at a later date by a request for proposals. And so I'll just say that it is going concurrently with the ULURP, and it is unlikely to be awarded before the ULURP process concludes. Okay, great. I am going to next take a chat question. And then I'm also going to say, Peter, you're the next person with your hand up here. And so after this next Q&A question, we'll invite you to come off mute and ask your question live. So the next question in the Q&A is from Katie Hine, who has asked, is there a limitation or guideline on who can provide feedback? Do people need to identify as living within a certain distance of the area? I'm going to hand that question to Hee-Kyung because it looks like she knows the answer.
Thanks, Mahesh. So the answer is no. We welcome feedback from any member of the public who lives and works and plays in the Long Island State neighborhood. Residents from the 11101 zip code are encouraged to participate and share their feedback on the plan. But we also welcome comments from anyone who's in the city.
Thank you very much, Hee-Kyung. I think I can handle the next question, which is also related to feedback here. So they Anonymous has asked, where do we submit comments or feedback for the proposed amendments once the draft land use application and environmental impact statements are available? So I will just say that feedback from the public can be accepted at all phases of the ULURP process. I'd encourage you, if you're interested in participating, to contact Community Boards 1 and or 2 or other bodies that are holding public hearings as described in the presentation. The City Planning Commission, City Council will have a hearing on this eventually, so that you can have those ideas known by the folks who are going to be reviewing them as part of those bodies. You may be able to speak publicly at the community board meeting, but if you can't do that, you can almost certainly submit written comments to the community board that they can take into consideration. All right. Next up, Peter, if you are with us and available to unmute, it is your mic.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I had posted this question at 6:40, one of the first questions, but somehow it didn't get addressed. So what was the criteria to locate 320 income-restricted housing units in the lowest elevation of the current floodplain? What guarantees will be in place to accommodate this vulnerable population in case of evacuation due to storms and flooding, which have occurred in this neighborhood previously? Will this guarantee remain in place until at least 2050?
Thank you. And the guarantee, you mean the permanency of their affordable housing?
No, I'm talking about how will you evacuate this vulnerable population, because flooding will get worse as we progress.
Thank you for the clarification, Peter.
Okay.
I'm going to hand the question over to Colin, who can help answer that question.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, we definitely share your concern regarding resiliency and then how we address it specifically here in Long Island City. I'll just start off by mentioning that some of our mapping changes to the citywide street map does kind of require lifting those elevations of the streets surrounding this site. But on top of that, I also call out that emergency management protocols would apply to this site the same way it does to other housing located in the floodplain throughout the city. Also, HPD works really closely with our Department of Emergency Management. That's an agency within New York City, and when building housing in the floodplain. And additionally, on top of that, HPD also has resilient design guidelines for building in coastal flood areas to help protect their residents. So we're definitely interested in creating housing that's accessible to everybody and that is permanently accessible and resilient for the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Colin. I'm just going to note that we are almost at time here. And so I'd say let's just close out after this and the next question. We'll take 2 more questions here. I see Stephanie Taylor, you're the only one who currently has your hand up. I'm going to go to you as our final closeout question after this Q&A question, okay? And so in that case, I'm going to go to a question from Brian V that came in earlier with the question, are there plans to improve Dutch Kills, Queensbridge neighborhood's street infrastructure? He notes that there's many potholes on the road and that a lot of the scaffolding and construction on the sidewalks makes it unpleasant to walk, bike, and drive in the area. And he asks whether you can receive more attention in the area and planning around this issue. So I am going to hand this over to Hee Kyung, who can talk a little bit about coordination with the Department of Transportation.
Thank you. Thanks for your question. Coordination to make sure that these potholes in the road are safe is critical. Routine maintenance of the roads is usually under the jurisdiction of the Department of Transportation, DOT. And if there are persistent issues with street conditions in this area, please reach out to 311 to share your concerns, because that is sort of a timely concern. Just wanting to note that we've passed along these concerns through the planning process to our partner agencies, and we will continue to pass them along to DOT.
Thank you very much, Shikyung. All right, being that we are at time and a little over, I'm just going to hand over to Stephanie Taylor for our closing question of the evening. Oh, if Stephanie is here. Maybe, nope, she's gone. Okay. Well, then we're going to close the meeting because we are currently at time. So I will just say, first off, thank you to everybody who joined us this evening at the information session. It's been a pleasure to be in community with you once more, even though it's online, and hopefully the answers to the questions you all received tonight and the info has been helpful. I'll note for folks that we have a record of all the questions that were submitted today in writing, and we will work with Department of City Planning to get answers to all those questions posted up on the project website in the coming weeks. This meeting was also recorded this evening, and so we will be posting the recording of the meeting as well so that folks can review this as need be. I will just say, look out for the coming draft neighborhood plan that will be hitting the shelves soon, and I'm sure you'll all run to go get a copy. I don't know if it's printed, but Hee-kyung, if you can please close us out for the evening.
Yeah, thank you, Pahish, and thank you, Councilmember Wan, for attending with us today. Thank you to the public for being here. Thank you to the WXY team for coordinating with us. Just wanted to thank you all. We're excited to move to the next stage of the process. So keep your eyes open for emails and posts about the certification coming in the next few weeks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a good night.